the night Dante Ricci told her to leave. The rain was coming down in cold, indifferent sheets against the floor-to-ceiling glass of his 43rd floor penthouse. Nora Callahan stood in the center of the white marble foyer, her grey silk dress damp at the hem, her hands clasped low in front of her, not in submission, but because she didn't trust herself to keep them still any other way. "You heard me." Dante didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. He stood near the wet bar, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his dark eyes fixed on her with the same practiced calm he used when he fired men, when he dissolved partnerships, when he ended things that no longer served him. "Take nothing of mine. Walk out the way you walked in." Around them, 3 of his lieutenants stood at quiet attention, Marco near the hallway, 2 others flanking the entry. None of them looked at her. That was the protocol. Pretend the woman doesn't exist until she's gone. Nora looked at Dante for a long moment. 4 years. 4 years of navigating his silences, his dangerous moods, his rare, devastating tenderness that always vanished before she could hold on to it. 4 years of learning which version of him walked through the door each night. And now this, a dismissal delivered like a business closure, with witnesses and everything. "I'm not taking anything," she said quietly. "Good." He turned back to the window. She walked out. The elevator doors closed behind her, and she stood alone in the mirrored cab as it descended 43 floors. Watching her own reflection, her face was composed. Her hands had stopped shaking. She pressed one palm flat against her stomach, a small, private gesture, and breathed. She already had the only thing that mattered. 3 weeks before that night, Nora had sat in a clinic in Midtown, with a paper gown crackling every time she shifted on the examination table. The doctor, a calm woman named Dr. Farrell with reading glasses on a beaded chain, had confirmed what the test at the drugstore had already told her. 8 weeks. "Doctor," Farrell said, reviewing the screen beside her. "Strong heartbeat. Everything looks healthy." Nora had driven herself there. She'd paid in cash. She'd given a name that wasn't quite her own, close enough to be plausible, different enough to be untraceable. She'd learned those habits from 4 years of living on the edge of Dante Ricci's world, where information was currency and privacy was survival. She hadn't told him. She'd meant to in the abstract, optimistic way a person means to do something they're quietly terrified of. She'd told herself she was waiting for the right moment, but the right moment in Dante Ricci's life was always the moment after the next crisis, the next negotiation, the next visit from men whose names she was never given, and then the crisis that ended everything arrived not in the form of a rival or a raid, but in the form of a woman named Celeste Varro, who arrived at the penthouse on a Tuesday evening with a suitcase and a handshake deal that Nora was apparently not included in. She never found out the exact nature of the arrangement. She didn't need to. She saw it in the way Dante looked at Celeste with focus, with calculation, with the particular brand of attention he reserved for acquisitions he intended to keep. She saw it in the way he looked at Nora afterward with something that wasn't cruelty. Exactly. But was its close cousin indifference toward the inconvenient. The dismissal came 4 days later. No argument, no accusation, just the rain, the marble foyer, his quiet voice, and the door. Nora's sister, Becca, lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up in a neighborhood in South Philadelphia that smelled like garlic and laundry detergent and was nothing at all like anywhere Dante Ricci had ever been. Becca opened the door at 11:30 at night in a faded university sweatshirt. I took one look at Nora's face and stepped aside without asking any questions. That was the thing about Becca. She always had the grace to wait. They sat at her small kitchen table with mugs of tea Becca had made too strong, and Nora told her everything. The dismissal, the rain, the foyer, and then the other thing, the 8 weeks, the heartbeat, the cash-paid appointment in Midtown. Becca listened until the end. Then she wrapped both hands around her mug and said, "What do you want to do? I'm keeping it," Nora said. She hadn't phrased it as a decision she was still arriving at. It came out as fact. The way certain things do when you've already made up your mind without realizing it. Becca nodded. Then we figure it out. That was how it started. Not with a plan. Exactly. But with the two of them at a small table and a shared agreement that whatever came next, they would face it, practically. Without drama. Without collapse. The town of Harwick, New Jersey, was 40 miles from Manhattan and approximately 40 years removed from it in atmosphere. It had a main street with a hardware store, a diner called Patsy's, a community library that smelled like old binding glue, and a rental market that Nora could almost afford on the salary she rebuilt from scratch. She found work as an office manager for a small civil engineering firm, a job that used skills she'd kept sharp during her years with Dante. When she'd handled logistics and scheduling and the quiet administrative backbone of operations, she'd known better than to examine too closely. The firm was run by a decent man named Gerald Holt, who asked no awkward questions and paid on time and left her alone to do her work. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner on Orchard Lane. The landlord, Mrs. Bio, was 73 and hard of hearing, and gave Nora a discount on the second month because she helped carry groceries up the stairs once. The apartment had old radiators that clanged at night and windows that let in a thin draft in winter. But it was hers, and it was quiet. And it was safe. She named her son Ellis. He was born on a Thursday in late October, in a hospital in Trenton, with Becca holding her hand through 9 hours of labor. He had dark hair and dark eyes, and a face that, when Nora first looked at it, I made something in her chest rearrange itself permanently. He was small and furious, and entirely himself from the first breath. She listed no father on the birth certificate. She told no one in Harwick anything about her life before. Ellis grew the way children grow in small towns, where they are known quickly, loudly, with deep roots in the particular geography of their childhood. He knew every employee at Patsy's Diner by name by the time he was 5. He knew which library shelves held the best illustrated books. He knew that Mrs. Pio on the ground floor kept hard candies in a bowl on her credenza and gave them freely to anyone who knocked and asked nicely. Nora watched him become himself with a kind of ferocious, quiet love she had not known she was capable of. She did not think about Dante often. Or rather, she worked not to. In the early months, his face surfaced sometimes when she couldn't sleep. When Ellis made an expression that reminded her of something. When a news headline mentioned the Ricci name, in connection with a federal investigation that ultimately produced no charges, as those things rarely did. She'd learned to let those moments pass like weather, acknowledge them, release them, move. She built a life. It was not a glamorous life. It had tight budgets and long hours and evenings grading preschool homework at the kitchen table while Ellis slept. But it was honest. And it was hers. And there was a particular freedom in that. She had not known to want until she had it. Becca visited every few months. She spoiled Ellis systematically and without apology. She and Nora stayed up late on the rare nights. He slept easily, drinking wine and talking the way sisters talk, when the years haven't worn the connection thin. "Does he ever look for you, Becca?" asked once. "Several years in, I don't know," Nora said. "I don't think so. I wasn't." She paused. "I wasn't someone he would look for. I think I knew that before I left." Becca didn't push. She refilled the wine instead. Ellis was 7. When the first cracks appeared in Dante Ricci's empire, Nora read about it the same way she read about most news on her phone. In the kitchen. In the 20 minutes between dropping Ellis at school and starting her commute. The headline was careful in the way legal reporting tends to be. "Ricci Holdings, under federal scrutiny, second grand jury convened." She put the phone face down on the counter, made her coffee, and drove to work. She told herself it had nothing to do with her. She was almost right. 2 weeks later, a man she didn't recognize rang her doorbell on a Saturday afternoon while Ellis was at a birthday party 3 houses down. He was well-dressed, patient-looking, and showed her a federal identification card before she'd finished opening the door. "Miss Callahan," he said. "I'm Agent Harris. VB. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your time with Dante Ricci." She looked at the badge for a moment. Then she stepped back and let him in. She had not done anything wrong. That was the thing she reminded herself of. Calmly and precisely, while Agent Harris and a colleague named Reyes sat at her kitchen table with notepads and careful manners. She had not participated in anything illegal. She had done administrative work, managed calendars, coordinated logistics for events she had sometimes understood to be more than they appeared, and had made a deliberate choice not to examine. She had kept her head down and her hands clean, but she had seen things. She had been present for conversations. She had, in 4 years, in that penthouse, accumulated a particular kind of knowledge, the accidental, ambient kind that comes from proximity rather than intent. She called a lawyer before she answered any substantive questions. The lawyer, a brisk woman named Carol Stanton, who charged $480 an hour and was worth every cent, sat beside her for 2 subsequent meetings with the federal investigation team and helped Nora navigate what she could say, what she was required to say, and what remained her private business. Ellis remained her private business. She did not offer his existence. No one asked. She kept the 2 halves of her life in separate, airtight compartments, the way she had always been careful to do. The investigation expanded. Ricci Holdings, it emerged, had been using a network of shell companies to move money through a chain of transactions so elaborate that the forensic accountants working the case described it in the press, with visible frustration, as resembling a hall of mirrors. 3 of Dante's lieutenants entered plea negotiations. One of them, a man named Falk, whom Nora remembered as the quieter of the 2 who'd flanked the entry the night she was dismissed, provided substantial cooperation. Dante himself remained largely silent in public. His legal team issued statements. He made one appearance outside a courthouse in Lower Manhattan, looking unchanged, the same controlled stillness, the same dark precision, the same face that gave nothing away. Nora saw the photo in a news aggregate and felt something she couldn't cleanly name. Not grief. Exactly. Not sympathy. Certainly. Something more like the sensation of pressing a bruise that has mostly healed. She closed the tab and helped Ellis with his spelling homework. He was 8 when Dante Ricci was indicted on 17 counts. He was 8.5 when Nora received, through Carol Stanton, a document she had not expected, a civil action from Ricci's legal team seeking information about her relationship with the defendant for the purposes of an ongoing civil dispute specifics she didn't fully understand, and that Carol navigated with the practiced calm of someone who had seen stranger things. What Carol found in the process of responding to that civil inquiry was that the opposition had apparently been doing their own research, and their research had been thorough. They know about Ellis, Carol said, on the phone. In the flat tone lawyers use when they need you to absorb information quickly. Nora sat down. Her kitchen chair scraped against the linoleum. The radiator clanged once, as if punctuating the sentence. "What do they know?" she asked. "Enough. Date of birth. Public school enrollment record. Your address here wasn't in any database, but they have investigative resources." Carol paused. "They haven't done anything with it yet, but they know." The silence on Nora's end lasted approximately 5 seconds. "Then we get ahead of it," she said. She told Ellis that evening. He was sitting at the coffee table working on a drawing. He had a particular gift for it. Precise and patient, in a way that sometimes made her breath catch, because she could not always tell where he had gotten it from. She sat beside him on the floor, cross-legged, and waited until he looked up. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, "about your dad." Ellis regarded her with the particular steadiness of a child who has been raised to know that important conversations require stillness. "Okay," he said. She had rehearsed this. She had a version of it prepared, age-appropriate, measured, honest, without being burdening. She told him that his father was a powerful man she had known before Ellis was born, that they hadn't been together when Ellis came along, that she had made choices to protect them both, that his father didn't know he existed, that this was changing now, not because she had chosen it, but because some situations don't stay still just because you want them to. "Is he dangerous?" Ellis asked. Nora looked at her son for a moment. He was 8. He had dark eyes and dark hair, and he looked at her with a gravity that sometimes caught her off guard. "He's complicated," she said. "I won't let anything bad happen to you. That's the only thing I need you to know for certain." Ellis thought about this for a moment. The way he thought about most things seriously, without rushing. Then he looked back at his drawing. "Okay," he said. "Can I finish this first?" She almost laughed. "Yes," she said. "Finish it first." Carol filed the necessary disclosures. The civil action became complicated. The criminal case became more complicated. And somewhere in the machinery of Dante Ricci's unraveling legal situation, the fact of a son he hadn't known about landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples in every direction simultaneously. The response from his legal team was not what she expected. She had anticipated aggression, a challenge to paternity, a claim of fraud for her failure to disclose, something adversarial and cold. She had prepared for that. She had Carol. She had documentation. She had the 8.5 years of evidence that she had raised Ellis alone, without support, without contact, without asking for anything. What she received instead was a letter personal, not legal, handwritten on plain paper in handwriting she recognized, forwarded through Carol with instructions that it had arrived uncounseled and that Carol could not advise her on how to respond. She read it at the kitchen table, after Ellis was asleep. It was 2 pages. The handwriting was controlled, but not entirely. There were places where the pressure of the pen had changed harder in some lines, lighter in others. Dante wrote that he had not contested the fact of the child's existence, that he had his own investigators' reports, and he had read them, and he had looked at the school photograph included in those reports until he could no longer pretend to himself that the child was not his. He wrote that he understood why she had said nothing. He didn't write that he forgave her for it. That would have required a moral position. He apparently wasn't prepared to claim from where he currently stood. He wrote that he had resources, and that despite the current legal situation, those resources were still accessible, and that if she would allow it, he would like Ellis to have whatever was in his power to give. He wrote one more thing. At the end, in a sentence that sat below the others with a space before it, as if he had paused before writing it, I gave an order that night. It was the correct order, for the wrong reasons. I didn't know what I was asking you to leave with. She folded the letter. She placed it in the back of a kitchen drawer, under a stack of takeout menus she never used. She sat for a while in the quiet of the apartment, the clanging radiator, the sound of Ellis breathing through the baby monitor she still used out of habit, even though he was 8.5. The street noise from Orchard Lane drifting up through the draft in the window. Then she got up, made herself a cup of tea she didn't particularly want, and sat back down at the table. She had choices to make. Not panicked choices. Not reactive ones. Real ones. Carefully considered. With Ellis at the center of every calculation, the way he had always been. She thought about what Ellis deserved. She thought about what Dante had been, and what he was now, and what the distinction meant. She thought about Carol's advice that the legal landscape was shifting in ways that made engagement more protective than avoidance. She thought about her son's dark eyes, and the question he'd asked her, calmly, on the living room floor, is he dangerous? Not anymore, she thought. Not in the ways that matter. The trial lasted 11 weeks. Nora testified once, briefly, for the prosecution, about specific meetings she had witnessed and specific names she had heard. Carol sat beside her. She answered questions precisely and said nothing she hadn't confirmed was accurate. She was not asked about Ellis. Ellis was not part of the trial. 6 of the 17 counts resulted in conviction. Dante's legal team negotiated the rest. The sentence was 32 months, with eligibility for reduction. His attorneys, who were among the best in the country, were already constructing the appeal architecture before the verdict was fully read. Nora drove home from the courthouse alone. She stopped at Patsy's diner on the way. It was a Thursday, which was usually soup day, and she found she was very hungry and sat at the counter and ate chicken soup and crusty bread and thought about nothing in particular for 45 minutes, which was something she had learned to treat as a form of restoration. Then she picked Ellis up from school. The legal arrangements took almost a year to fully settle. Carol managed them. Nora reviewed every document. A trust was established for Ellis, structured, transparent, with independent oversight, funded in an amount that made Nora's practical nature flinch, and that Carol advised her, calmly but firmly, to accept for Ellis's sake, rather than refuse for the sake of her own sense of proportion. Dante wrote once more from where he was held. Upstate, a facility that was, by the standards of such places, not harsh. The letter was shorter this time. He said he had been told that Ellis liked to draw. He said he hoped Ellis would grow up without the complications that came from a life built on the wrong things. He said he was grateful for the photograph Carol had forwarded, a school picture. Ellis, in a blue sweater, looking directly at the camera with an expression that apparently, according to Dante's letter, he had needed to sit with for a while, before he could fully examine. He didn't ask to meet him. She thought he understood, for now, that the choice of when and whether and how would need to be Ellis's. Ellis was 10 when he asked. Out of nowhere. On a Sunday morning while they were making pancakes, which was their Sunday ritual. Had been since he was old enough to stir a bowl, whether his dad knew about him. He does now, Nora said. She kept her voice even. She had learned that even voices were a form of permission for children, a signal that a topic was survivable. Ellis stirred the batter carefully. The way he did everything. Did he want to? I think, Nora said, choosing her words with the precision she always gave to important things. That he surprised himself. Ellis considered this. Do I have to meet him? No. Nora said. Not ever. If you don't want to. Not until you want to. And if you do want to, I'll be there. He nodded slowly, like someone filing information into the correct drawer. The pancakes are ready, he said. She flipped them. They ate at the small kitchen table, with the window open because it was a warm morning in May, and the street below smelled like cut grass from the park 2 blocks away. Ellis ate 4 pancakes and showed her the drawing he'd been working on, a detailed illustration of a harbor. Ships at different distances rendered with a precision that still caught her breath sometimes. She looked at her son, his dark eyes focused on the drawing, his small hands careful with the pencil, his whole self concentrated on the thing in front of him, fully present in the way children are when they are doing what they love. She thought about the foyer, the marble floor, the rain on the windows, the quiet order given by a man who believed he was sending her away with nothing. He had been so certain. He had been, in that moment, so completely sure of what he was removing from her life. The apartment, the clothes, the access, the status that came from proximity to his power. He had never thought to ask what she was carrying with her when she walked out. She looked at Ellis. She poured herself more coffee and listened to him explain the harbor and the ships and which vessel in the illustration was his favorite. And why? And where it was going. And she thought, he ordered me to leave with nothing. He had no idea.